In this video, we are going to talk about the structure and function of cells. A cell is the smallest living unit that is capable of self-replication. Like we talked about in the Characteristics of Life video, organisms can be unicellular or multicellular. In 1665, Anton van Leeuwenhoek constructed the first simple microscope. He viewed pond water and saw tiny moving structures that he called wee little beasties or animalcules. Then in 1670, Robert Hooke, an English scientist, invented the first compound light microscope. He viewed bits of cork and called these tiny hollow units cells. After about 200 years, Robert Brown came in at 1833 to be the first to see a nucleus within a cell. These cells had stuff in them rather than being hollow like the cork. And then 20 years later, in 1855, Rudolf Virchow discovered that all cells come from other like or pre-existing cells, which led to the cell theory. The cell theory states three things. 1. Every living organism is made up of one or more cells. 2. Cells are the basic unit of structure and function of all living organisms. And 3. All cells arise from like or pre-existing cells. Let's look at the cell guts. Every cell has protoplasm, which is basically everything within the cell membrane. But what do all cells have within the protoplasm? All cells have a cytoskeleton, which is used for support and movement, ribosomes that make protein, DNA that contains the genetic information, a cell membrane that controls what goes in and out of the cell, and lastly, cytoplasm that provides suspension and support for organelles. Also, in the Characteristics of Life video, we talked about the two types of cells, eukaryotic and prokaryotic. The prokaryotic cells consist of bacteria, while the eukaryotic cells consist of animals, plants, fungi, and protists. Eukaryotic cells derive from the eukarya domain. They have a nucleus, unlike prokaryotic cells. The nucleus acts as the control center. They also contain organelles within their cell membrane that carry out all cell activity. And lastly, all eukaryotic cells have cilia, which are short, hair-like structures that extend from the cell membrane. The cell membrane isn't rigid like eggshells, but are more fluid like bubbles. They are selectively permeable, which allows specific selected items into and out of the cell with the protein tunnels. In 1972, the fluid mosaic model was discovered. It's a model of the structure of the membrane, including the hydrophilic and hydrophobic heads, protein channels, carbohydrate chains, and the phospholipid bilayer. Cell membranes also contain several types of proteins embedded in the bilayer. These are the receptor proteins that act as a docking area for items to attach to, as well as transporting proteins that transport items across the bilayer, and the adhesion proteins that project outward from the bilayer and help cells within a tissue to stick together. Next is the control center of the cell, the nucleus. It is surrounded by a nuclear membrane that has the same structure and purpose as the cell membrane. The nucleus also has small openings that allow transport across the membrane that are known as nuclear pores. Inside the nucleus, you will find DNA in the form of chromosomes or chromatin, RNA that holds information to make proteins, and the nucleolus that makes ribosomes. Then, in the endoplasmic reticulum, also known as ER, has two separate forms within one cell. There's the rough ER that attaches to the nuclear membrane. Proteins travel on the RER. And then there's the smooth ER that creates vesicles and phospholipids for the new membranes. Next, the ribosomes act as the cell's workbench. They make proteins in their linear primary form by assembling amino acids in the correct order based on the DNA's code. Ribosomes are made up of RNA, and proteins can be found attached to the endoplasmic reticulum or free-floating in the cytoplasm. Also, vesicles are created by the SER. They transport proteins around the cell. Like the cell membrane, vesicles have hydrophilic and hydrophobic heads. Then, the Golgi body is a set of flattened membrane-bound sacs. They receive proteins from the rough ER to modify, package, and sort, which is why the Golgi bodies also play a role in protein production. The ribosomes make proteins on RER and then are packaged into vesicles at the SER. The vesicles are then transported from the SER to the Golgi body. The Golgi body processes and packages proteins into new vesicles, and those vesicles travel to the cell membrane for release, or they stay in the cell to become lysosomes. Lysosomes contain digestive enzymes which protect the cell from digesting itself. Next is the powerhouse of the cell, the mitochondria. This is the place where the cell converts food to energy. It then harvests this energy to make ATP. The mitochondria also have their own DNA, in which you only get from your mom. The mitochondria have two cellular membranes, an outer and an inner membrane. The inner membrane is known as the cristae, which increase the surface area so more energy can be produced without taking up too much room. Mitochondria are also the site of cellular respiration. Sugar and O2 combine to make ATP energy, carbon dioxide, water, and heat. Lastly, the centrioles are an organelle in the cell that are important in cell division. Thank you for watching.